Christian nationalism should we have it in Britain? I think we should. Shouldn't we be proud of our country, want to return it to being Christian and having Christian values?
Yes.
Surely that's Christian nationalism in Britain.
Yes.
That's what we want, isn't it? What do you think, Norman?
So are we about to have our first Hindu Prime Minister?
You have to ask the fundamental question there. I mean, what's a Hindu? It lays eggs. I think not. Rishi Sunak, one of the contenders for the leadership of the Conservative Party and sent to become Prime Minister, is a Hindu, and his opponent, Liz Truss, is...
I would actually say I haven't the slightest idea, which concerns me a lot. Seriously, we're at a crossroads of a choice. Not that I have the power to make a choice, because I'm not a member of the Conservative Party. One of our broadcasters is, and he doesn't know who to choose, and my son is, and he hasn't the slightest idea either. So we're actually in a mess.
It's an interesting topic of discussion, and listeners might be interested in our views because we've been following this story. Do we say Rishi Sunak should be in power because he went through a tough time, extraordinary circumstances, coping with the COVID-19 pandemic. But really, we should remember how he was viewed to start with as Dishy Rishi, the popular, charismatic Chancellor. He can now return, with the pandemic over, to his original plan, to go the country through his economic, in line with what they've been doing for the past 20 years.
Can I query your term, charismatic Chancellor? I'm fairly old-fashioned in my English, and always prefer to feel charismatic is actually filled with the Holy Spirit. Right. But I was disabused of that when I saw a big headline on the newspaper about 20 years ago which said the Pope is charismatic. Right. And I thought from then onwards, that's another word that the world has pinched.
Yes. Well, it's charismatic with a small c. Well, Rishi Sunak, who has that economic approach, basically more of the same, but in a professional, organised manner. Or you have Liz Truss has a very different view. We might say, in Liz we trust. Right?
Oh dear.
Or do we, is the question. She has a different approach to economics, and there were two main points I would make about her. 3 points. One is she's doing an impression of Margaret Thatcher whilst forgetting to do the voice.
I agree with you that she's trying to do an impression of
Margaret Thatcher, people think, she was authentically like that. She wasn't like that in the 70s until when she became going for leader. She engaged a marketing firm to help her, and she went through a transformation process. She was more groomed. She started wearing those more somber-looking suits, and she lowered her voice and spoke slower.
Yes.
Because she'd been too shrill. Yes. And so it was a creation.
And don't forget the handbag.
She also carried a handbag, yes. Liz Truss could do, maybe with hitting people with a handbag, I don't know. But if she lowered the voice and slowed down and took some lessons in how to present herself, it might help, because I believe she has, with a small c, a charisma vacuum. As Anne Widdecombe said, she's had a charisma bypass. But there's two main things. One is war. There doesn't seem to be a country in the world that Liz Truss doesn't want to go to war with. I'm surprised at how hawkish she is. So I'm a bit worried about that. What do you think of that?
Yes, I think I'm a little bit worried about it as well. Another thing that I'm worried about is she was interviewed before this election of another Prime Minister, or an election for a Tory leader came up. She was interviewed by one of the BBC journalists, and she said, "I have always been a controversialist."
Oh, right. Okay.
So I think we can expect that from her.
Not a bad thing. If you think things haven't been going swimmingly, maybe it's best to have someone who will try and change things. The other thing I was going to mention, I'll get your comment on this, Beryl, is there was some controversy over this. There's a difference in economic policies, particularly to do with the treatment of tax, between Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak. And Rishi Sunak takes the line that they've been taking for some time, past 20 years, I would say, in which when you're going, or you suspect you're going to be going into, or you're already in, a recession, so the economy is slowing down, what you do is you keep taxes high so you've got enough money to spend, to put into the economy, to stimulate growth. So you might, for example, have actual money put in to different companies, or you might have infrastructure projects to help with industry. If you do make back any money, the most important thing to do is to pay off the deficit.
I certainly believe that, and that's why I can't understand the socialists always going on about austerity. The Conservatives are applying austerity. No, they weren't. They were trying to put back their reserves.
True, yeah, and I guess you should pay. The question is how quickly you should pay back. That's the difference between the two.
Well, we haven't got forever.
No, probably not. The Lord will return at some point. But the Liz Truss approach is different then. So what she is saying is the way to stimulate the economy when you're going into a recession is to cut taxes. Now, people have said, well, she's made a mistake there because she should cut business tax and corporation tax. Well, I think that was included. I mean, that was what I took from what she said. And for individuals, she talked about cutting national insurance. Or did she? Well, this is the problem. It's referred to, and I think she's quite happy for it to be referred to as tax cuts. Actually, it is reversing the tax increases that Rishi Sunak is putting in.
Likely.
So it's not so much a tax cut as a lack of tax increase.
I've got something I would like to say to Rishi Sunak. In my experience, when the Christian God calls you to do something, into some ministry in some way, he calls you to put your heart and your soul into it, but also your finances. That's my experience of 20 years of Flame. It's probably your experience, Peter, with regards to your Christian ministry.
Well,
and so I trust that Mr. Sunak realises that if he does actually take this great position, that he's got to put his bank balance on the line.
That is one of the controversies around him, that he is so independently wealthy.
Is he independently wealthy apart from his wife?
From his wife. That means that because the money or the wealth is held outside the country, that he's not really affected by any tax policy that he puts into place, etc., etc. It does make you question.
If he is a Hindu, does he believe that it is imperative for him to proclaim Hinduism?
It's interesting because it's a very different religion to Christianity, isn't it? As I've seen him operate, I've seen no sign of him try and promote it.
That's the kind of thing we don't know.
And it would be interesting to know.
Yes.
As it would be interesting to know how Liz Truss's decisions are made.
Yeah, because if somebody stood up and said that they were an evangelical born-again Christian who would like to be Prime Minister, you could be certain that the press would absolutely be all over the person's Christianity and background. And yet this person, his religion is kept in the closet and it is ignored, almost as though you dare not touch it. And I think it would probably be true also if a Muslim got into power.
Or a Buddhist.
Yeah. Just finally on the Liz Truss point, she wants to cut taxes. Rishi Sunak doesn't want to do that yet. He says he will once they've coped with the recession. It was put to Liz Truss that was inflationary to cut taxes. That is the orthodox position. And then Nick Robinson, the BBC correspondent, puts to Liz Truss that she didn't know what she was talking about. And he asked, what economist or official of the Bank of England agrees with you that cutting taxes is non-inflationary? And she named an economist, Patrick Mitford. And he said, well, he's not one of the ones I listed. I think he was surprised that she named one. I think he was caught out there. But I believe that she is correct. And it's for this reason. I don't care who these economists are. If they're saying that cutting taxes is inflationary, I think they're wrong. You see, inflation is often, and it's still, if you look up a standard definition, it's referred to as being the gradual increase in prices. But although that's true, that it involves that, inflation really, it's called inflation, is an inflated supply of money, in which each unit of money is worth less. What we sometimes call printing money or quantitative easing. There's more money around.
Is she saying that, though, because if taxes are cut, people might be more prepared to invest?
Invest and spend more. Just spend more. It's to boost the economy. So, just to continue my point, so that would cause inflation if there were more money put in through that method. And it's put in by buying government bonds. A government bond isn't actually something, it's just an amount of money stored somewhere. And that means that there's extra amounts of money there that are then go into the economy for people who own these bonds. So it has the effect that I said of what's sometimes called printing money. You get extra money. And then, inevitably, prices go up. In fact, each unit, each pound is worth less. So therefore, the prices have to go up over time to reflect that gradually. So that will cause it. But what she's talking about is something different. It's money that already exists. But instead of taking it and the government spending it, she's letting the public spend it. And so that stimulates the economy. So that's very different. You've got more money circulating in the economy, the people buying stuff and, as you say, investing in companies, instead of the government having to pay themselves for things that they're doing. So you've freed up money, but it's the same amount of money altogether, so it's not inflationary. I just think that she's right on this one. What do you think, Norman? Do you agree with that?
I'm not an economist, but as I see it, there are a few reasons for prices going up.
Yeah.
One is we are at war, in simple terms. Another one is, unfortunately, the person we are at war with, historically, we have been buying fuel from and have no means at the moment of doing anything else other than trying to continue. And the third thing is that a part of the world believes that because of our lifestyles in various different ways, including fossil fuels, we are coming towards a catastrophic position on the earth called climate change. Put those three together and you've got most of the reason for the inflation that exists. And no amount of twiddling around with taxes will make the slightest bit of difference, will it?
Yeah, you've got the fundamental problems there, which we talked about with this trust seeming to support hitting Russia harder, maybe even going directly to war with them. And that's my suspicion. That's not something she's directly said, but that's my fear. With Rishi Sunak not being that different on that point, but not wanting to change the current position. So he's the more continuation candidate in terms of long-term, the Conservative cabinet's view. Liz Truss is the continuation cabinet. As she said, I thought that Boris Johnson should remain Prime Minister, but now that he's not there, I put my name forward. So she sees herself as a continuation of Boris Johnson.
Right.
So you got two different choices there, and that's what's going to be put to the Conservative Party, not to the country as a whole, which I think is quite right, because really you vote the party into power. That's fine, but it's fine really. But they will get their comeuppance at the next election if they don't get it right.
Yes.